Beginning. The worst diplomatic accident in human history. There are many ways to ruin your career in interstellar diplomacy. You can insult an alien leader. You can break a sacred law. You can accidentally start a war. But very few people in galactic history have managed to do something quite as disastrous as what I did. My name is Aaron Hale, and I was a junior cultural advisor for the Human Coalition's Diplomatic Corps. That title sounds impressive, but in reality my job was simple. Stand quietly behind real diplomats and make sure they didn't accidentally offend alien civilizations with human habits. Things like shaking hands, pointing, or making eye contact could mean very different things in other cultures. My job was to prevent awkward mistakes, which makes what happened next incredibly ironic. Because the worst diplomatic mistake of the decade was entirely my fault, and it involved the princess of the Valari Empire. The Valari Empire. The Valari were one of the most powerful civilizations humanity had encountered. Their technology was centuries ahead of ours, their fleets were massive, and their society was built on strict traditions that outsiders barely understood. But unlike many advanced empires, the Valari were curious about humanity. They had invited human representatives to their capital world, Lythris, to begin formal diplomatic relations. It was supposed to be a peaceful and historic meeting. Our delegation included ambassadors, scientists, and cultural experts. And then there was me, the junior advisor who mostly carried translation notes and tried not to embarrass Earth. For the first 2 days, everything went smoothly. We toured their incredible cities, attended ceremonial banquets, and exchanged gifts between our civilizations. But on the 3rd day, we were invited to the Royal Garden ceremony. And that's when everything went wrong. The Royal Garden. The gardens of Lythris were unlike anything I had ever seen. Massive glowing trees rose hundreds of meters into the sky, their branches covered in floating crystal leaves that shimmered like tiny stars. Soft blue rivers flowed through the landscape, creating gentle waterfalls that echoed through the air like music. The entire garden felt alive. At the center stood a marble platform where the royal family greeted honored guests. That's where we were escorted. And that's where I saw her for the first time. Princess Elora. Even among the elegant Valari people, she stood out immediately. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver glow, and long strands of dark blue hair flowed down her shoulders like liquid night. Her eyes were bright violet, reflecting the garden lights around her. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, graceful, like someone who had spent her entire life being watched by the galaxy. The ambassadors approached her first, bowing respectfully. Formal greetings were exchanged. Everything went exactly as planned. Then it was my turn to step forward. And that's when the disaster began. The cultural misunderstanding. I had studied Valari culture for months before arriving on Lythris. Their greetings were complex but manageable. A slight bow, hands placed over the heart, direct eye contact for exactly 3 seconds, then a polite step backward. Simple, or at least it should have been. The problem was that Valari greeting customs changed slightly depending on status. And I had memorized the greeting for royal advisors, not royal family members, which meant that when I stepped forward to greet Princess Elora, I was already doing the wrong thing. I bowed slightly, placed my hand over my heart, and leaned forward. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, the princess leaned forward too. Valari royalty apparently greeted guests by placing a small ceremonial gem near the visitor's forehead. But I didn't know that. So instead of the gem touching my forehead, our faces collided. And before either of us could react, our lips touched for exactly 1 second. Then we both froze. The entire garden went completely silent. The reaction. For a moment, nobody moved. Hundreds of Valari nobles stared in absolute shock. The human ambassadors looked like they might faint. One of the royal guards actually dropped his ceremonial staff. My brain stopped working. I had just kissed an alien princess. Accidentally. In the middle of a royal ceremony. In front of half the Volari nobility. This was how diplomatic careers ended. Or how war started. I stepped back quickly. "I am so sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean..." But Princess Elora raised her hand. And something unexpected happened. She started laughing. Not loudly, but clearly amused. The entire garden looked even more confused. She studied me for a moment, her violet eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You did that intentionally?" she asked. "No," I said quickly. "It was an accident." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Interesting." That wasn't the reaction I expected. The meaning behind the gesture. Later that evening, I was summoned to a private chamber inside the royal palace. Naturally, I assumed I was about to be formally reprimanded or quietly sent back to Earth. Instead, Princess Elora was waiting for me alone. She stood beside a large window overlooking the glowing city of Lithoris. "You seem nervous," she said. "I accidentally kissed a princess in front of your entire court," I replied. "Yes, I'm nervous." She smiled slightly. In Volari culture, physical contact between strangers is extremely rare. That makes this worse, doesn't it? Not necessarily. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She walked slowly around the room. Among Volari, an unexpected kiss is considered a gesture of extraordinary courage. My brain tried to process that. Courage? Yes. Even if it's an accident? She studied me carefully. "Most Volari nobles believe you did it intentionally." "That's definitely not true." She laughed softly. "But they admire the boldness." I sat down slowly in the nearest chair. "So instead of starting a diplomatic crisis, I accidentally impressed your entire royal court." "Yes." I shook my head. Space is weird. A growing friendship. Over the next few days, something strange happened. Instead of avoiding me, Princess Elora kept requesting my presence during official events. At first I assumed it was just curiosity. But the more we talked, the more I realized something. She was fascinated by humans. Our unpredictability. Our tendency to take risks. Our strange mix of fear and bravery. "You humans are very unusual," she told me one evening while we walked through the royal gardens. "Why?" "You act before you overthink. That's not always a good thing." "Perhaps," she said, "but it is refreshing." Then she looked at me with a playful smile. "And apparently it leads to memorable greetings." I groaned. "Please don't remind me." Ending. The kiss that changed everything. On my final day on Lithoris, the human delegation prepared to return to Earth. Diplomatic talks had been successful. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs were planned. And somehow, my accidental kiss had become a famous story across the Volari capital. Just before I boarded the shuttle, Princess Elora came to see me. "You are leaving," she said. "Yeah. Duty calls." She looked thoughtful. "Your visit has been entertaining." That's one word for it. Then she stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the faint glow in her violet eyes. "In Volari culture," she said softly, "a bold first gesture often deserves a proper reply." Before I could ask what she meant, she leaned forward. And this time, the kiss was intentional. When she stepped back, she smiled. Now the greeting is balanced. I stood there completely speechless. Behind us, several diplomats pretended not to watch. Princess Elora turned and walked back toward the palace, clearly pleased with herself. As I boarded the shuttle back to Earth, I realized something unbelievable. The most embarrassing moment of my life had somehow become the most important diplomatic success humanity had ever achieved. Because sometimes peace between civilizations doesn't begin with treaties or negotiations. Sometimes it begins with a very awkward accident and a princess who admires courage.